Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Sri Banerjee, epidemiologist, biostatistician, faculty member, and in this segment I'm going to be going over a recently published peer-reviewed journal article that was published, and I worked in a team. So the first author was Dr. Joseph McMillan. I was the second author. Third author was Dr. Gonzalez Lagos. And then the final author was Wayne Harris. Um, so let me go ahead and get started. So gun violence, the reason we selected this topic is because number one, we had multiple police officers in our team that wanted to translate research into practice. And so over a matter of about a year, we actually came up with this research, and there were multiple components here that I'm going to be scrolling down and going over. There was some geospatial elements. There was some census tract. Um, so initially, we went into the gun violence archive and extracted some data about gun violence incidents. So then we decided to go into urban areas and take a look at where was the highest distribution of gun violence, and accordingly potentially create programs accordingly. Um, so multiple theories are being used here. So epicrim is a theory that was introduced in England, and actually the Cardiff model was established in England, but the epicrim is actually the fusion of epidemiology and criminology to create a discipline that is a multidisciplinary approach. So epicrim was an important approach. We also looked at social deprivation, or looking at some components of the social determinants of health, but not quite going into that. So predominantly we looked at social vulnerability index. So here's the abstract here, and you can kind of summarize and take a look. What was interesting, and I included this, is that children in St. Louis were involved in more gun violence incidents than the other two cities that were Washington and Atlanta. So what we ended up doing also created a composite model. So let's take a look at the Cardiff model. Cardiff model is actually something that was created in Wales, England, and taking a look at certain components of gun violence to be able to determine some areas that require work in this area. So here is epicrim, Akers and Lanier first recommended this. So here's where we go into that. Very alarming gun violence is actually in around January, February, or somewhat later, but they went into declaring gun violence a public health emergency. So here is the social determinants of health and social vulnerability index. The social vulnerability index actually has four themes. And what we did is we created census tract information and fused that with individual level data to kind of give us a overview of what is going on within these communities, to try to better understand how this can be characterized and contextualized in a way that people can people can start to develop their own theory. So here's a public health approach that could be used with criminology models, like the Cardiff model. And so taking a look at that is very important. And then here are some of the themes that were included. So socioeconomic status, household characteristics. Third theme is racial and ethnic minority status, and then household type and transportation. So here was the data analysis. We selected three cities: Atlanta, St. Louis, and Washington, D.C. Their populations were somewhat similar. So then taking a look at some of the visuals. So here I Rand, Poisson regression. Actually, this is the characteristics of the three major cities, and then below we'll see Poisson regression. So there are differences, for instance, in gender, as you would expect. Older adults are not a group that engages in gun violence as much as being in the 20s, 30s. So here's the injury status, how many people were killed, and that's 30%. In Atlanta, 38%, in St. Louis, and then 24% in Washington, D.C. So the increased, number of people that were injured, or the number of people that were killed is quite high. And then I go ahead and calculate the mean mean gun violence. Then I went into looking at some of the census tract information, and I thought the composite model was most informative. And if you take a look here, out of all of them, households without broadband is one of the top areas. Unemployment, that was statistically significant. And then taking a look at racial ethnic minority, that was actually one of the top indicators. So there are multiple themes, and taking a look at some of these themes allow some of the government officials to be able to make conclusions out of this. So this is kind of a busy slide, but similar to a forest plot, this goes in and shows, for instance, I told you racial minority is quite high in Atlanta. Even more important, racial minority was in B, that is Washington, D.C. So even though some of the incidence is lower in D.C., but ethnic minority is an area, segregation is an area that is important to take a look. And the same holds true with some of the different cities as well. So that's important to note. And then, of course, poverty kind of consistently. Poverty actually consistently takes a look at also as an important indicator. So this is poverty. This is not as close, but this is even closer. So even higher. So that this is kind of a reflection of how each city is looked at. So here's an important map. So this is looking at the top two are looking at Atlanta and St. Louis. So these are actually Atlanta and Washington, D.C. And then this is C is looking at St. Louis. This is kind of the distribution. And then taking a look at this, here's some bivariate analysis, and if basically the slope goes up like racial minority, that means there's higher incidence as you go over. So here's the effects plot, and then we go into the discussion looking at how to take these different types of concepts and findings and to make sense out of that. So here's some of the programs that are already existing as it pertains to some of these programs, and then here's a table that we made to provide similar sorts of programs that are mentioned from Cardiff model. So the Cardiff model was created by Jonathan Shepard, going into enhancing the overall understanding of community violence and taking geospatial components and constructs and applying that is especially important. Here's some programs that you can take a look. Here's the implications. Of course, from a collaborative approach, we can start to apply Epicrim, and then Cardiff model can provide context, a contextualized awareness of where these are taking place. So here's the strengths and limitations and conclusion, and here's some of the references. So I hope this has made some sense. Thank you for listening.